Hello and welcome to Finextra. I'm Emily Horler and I'm here with Leo Lipis from Lipis Advisors and Tom Hay of Icon Solutions. And we're talking about the instant payments insights from early adopters research. Thank you both for joining me.
Good to be here. My pleasure.
There's a lot of talk around instant or real-time payments, from enabling the shared gig economy to facilitating international trade. What's the current state of the instant payments landscape?
Well, there can be no doubt that instant payments is one of the major trends in payments over the last 10 years. We've seen the development of instant payments or real-time payment systems in well over 20 countries at this point. And what's driving that development is a mixture of factors. On the one hand, we're seeing commercial drivers in countries like Sweden, Denmark, Poland, and we're also seeing regulatory drivers in other countries, places like the UK, and a mixture of drivers in places like the Euro area, the United States and Australia, and Singapore, and others, quite frankly. And these solutions are catering for a variety of use cases as well. On the one hand, we have P2P payments, which tend to be a lot of the headline-grabbing, sort of sexy applications that people talk about a lot. At the same time, though, we're really seeing very strong use cases in P2B, or consumer-to-business payments, typically bill payments and things like that. We're also seeing applications increasingly in business-to-business payments, as well as in businesses paying consumers. And so they really are becoming the norm. What used to take a day or two to make a payment is now happening within seconds. And connecting to these schemes is often a problem for the banks. The larger banks, to be sure, given enough time and enough resource, don't really have too much problem in connecting to these payment systems, whereas the smaller banks often face significant challenges.
I'd agree with that, Leo. Icon have worked with banks, large and small, for a number of years in the area of faster payments and instant payments. And generally, the bigger banks can throw a lot of budget at this and do major system enhancements to get connected to the new instant payment schemes. But the smaller banks perceive it as being too difficult, too expensive, too costly, and often settle for a second-rate service via an indirect connection, which doesn't give them the same level of service as the major banks. So we wanted to commission some independent research to look into the different approaches that smaller and medium-sized banks could take to connecting through to the new instant payment schemes, and whether there are other solutions rather than this kind of rip and replace the whole of the existing payments landscape.
So what does the research show us?
Well, one of the things that Icon asked us to look at was in conducting the research was how is it that small and medium-sized banks, as well as subsidiaries of larger foreign banks, are implementing instant payments in local markets. And as a result of that, we went out to the market and did research with more than 15 different organizations, boiled that down to 6 different case studies, and from that developed models that resulted in 3 different scenarios: a low, medium, and high cost scenario, which are largely related to the complexity of the implementation and for the bank that's actually going through it. What it really shows is that the projects need not be as expensive as many perceive them to be. The cumulative costs over the course of a 5-year period can be as low as about 500,000 euros at the low end, can go up to about 5 million euros at the high end. And the drivers of those costs, at least in the initial phase, in the first year, are really related to the complexity of the implementation, how much integration effort is needed to connect with existing systems. However, as time goes on, it's really the maintenance costs, it's the scheme changes and implementing those changes over time that really end up adding up over time, such that although in that initial phase, the customization and the configuration and so on can be a large portion of the cost, by the time you make it out to year 5, by far the largest cost is what we would call maintenance, which are fees paid to the solution provider over time for actually maintaining that solution and keeping up with the changes. So effectively, really what this shows is that instant payments are not the preserve of large multinational banks, but rather that there is a place for smaller banks to get involved. We've seen that not only from a technology side, but we've actually seen a regulatory push in several markets to make that happen, and the solutions are maturing to enable that.
Tom, what does all of this mean for small or medium banks?
It certainly confirms that small and medium banks can connect into instant payment schemes directly. The optimum is to take a modular approach, so rather than try and replace all of the existing payments estate, to put in something which will very much target the specific requirements for instant payments. Other interesting point that is made in the research is that the initial costs of the system 35% of those costs are taken up with configuration and integration, and another 25% with testing. So when a bank looks at the overall budget, they must take those costs into account rather than focusing purely on the license costs. So I think the research is extremely valuable, and I think it is going to help the smaller and medium-sized banks to construct a business case for connection into the instant payment schemes that they need to join.
Tom, Leo, thank you very much.
Thank you, Emily. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.